Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ethos podcast. I'm Victoria, an editor here at Ethos, and today I'm joined by Professor Rosie Young, who is an Emeritus Professor and Honorary Clinical Professor here at the University of Hong Kong, where she was formerly the Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Senior Pro-Vice-Chancellor, as well as the first female Dean of HKUMed. In her fruitful career, she has published over 100 papers, specifically in endocrinology, and she was also chair of the Medical Council and Working Party on Primary Health Care, as well as a member of many other boards. We are so honored to be able to speak with her today. Thank you so much, Professor Young, for joining me. How are you?
Thank you. Hello.
So are you doing well today?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'd like to start with your biography and asking you a little bit more about that. It was written by your former student and colleague, Professor Moira Chan-Yeung. Could I first ask you to share a little bit more about the cover page? I think it's a very interesting picture.
That's right. The photo was actually taken in 2017 when the Faculty of Medicine celebrated her 130th anniversary. Now, you all remember that the University of Hong Kong was founded in 1912, but the precursor of the University of Hong Kong is called the Hong Kong College of Medicine for Chinese, and it was founded in 1887. And one of our most distinguished graduates was Dr. Sun Yat-sen. He was one of the two graduates of the first batch of graduates. So in 2017, we celebrated our 130th anniversary. And the photograph shows the passing of the torch. I think that's very important that we have to pass the torch from one generation to another. We all also expect that each generation will be better than the previous one, no matter how distinguished the previous one might be. The celebration dinner was held at the convention center, and it was a big gathering of thousands of people there. It was a very enjoyable evening.
Right. Thank you for sharing. That's a really cool story. And speaking of stories, I'd like to talk more about your upbringing. And so in the biography, it says that you grew up in a family of scholars. And I wanted to ask you more about that and how that felt.
Well, my parents came from a place called Sekkei in Zhongshan. And their ancestors were not merchants. And my uncle, one of my uncles, was a so-called Shao Choi, a scholar in China by examination. So my father went there to study. In those days was a private school, and believe it or not, in those days usually the females would not be able to go to school, would be illiterate. But my mother, my maternal grandfather was very open, and he sent my mother to go to the same college, to private college, to study the Chinese characters. So my mother could write and read and read newspaper and so on. And that's my father then came to Hong Kong to study in Queen's College because he wanted to learn English. And after Queen's College, he went to the University of Hong Kong to study political science. But because he was poor and he had to work and study at the same time, so he had to do a lot of private coaching. And in the final examination, he failed in one subject. And because of that, he never got a diploma from University of Hong Kong. And he promised that if any of his children could qualify to go to University of Hong Kong, no matter how difficult financially he might be, he would send them to university. And that's why there was no discrimination against females, and I, being the last in the family, although a female, and could get into university.
Wow. And as the youngest, did you ever feel any pressure from your older siblings?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, my first two brothers also studied medicine in the University of Hong Kong. Unfortunately, my second brother studied medicine in 1941, and then because of the Second World War, he went to China to continue his study, and he had a car accident and died, so he never graduated. My eldest brother graduated from University of Hong Kong as a MBBS, medical doctor. There was no pressure whatsoever.
I'm so sorry for your loss,
That's
but
right.
that's very cool to learn about your dynamics. I also read that you liked playing teacher growing up. Was there anything else, other hobbies or interests that you had when you were younger?
The reason I liked playing teacher was because I was the youngest, the fifth among of the siblings. My elder sister, number 4, was 6 years older than I. So I had no playmate whatsoever at home, because by the time I grew up, she was already having boyfriends and so on. I had nobody to play with me. But in those days, in Hong Kong and in China is a very undemocratic situation. We were not poor, rich family, and yet we had 2 housemates at home. The housemates were actually sold as mui zai into our family because their parents were poor. We didn't have to pay them salary. We just brought them up. And when I was young, I liked to play with the mui zai and the mates, and I forced them to learn from me. I put them in a room and say, "This is a classroom. You have to read this. You have to write," and it's so distressing to them because they were illiterate. They didn't like the learning. I just forced upon them to teach them Chinese and a few simple arithmetic. Mm-hmm. I don't think I had any other interests in those days except forcing people to do what I wanted them to do.
So you were a clear leader from a young age. So I wanted to ask you more actually about your time as the first female dean of HKUMed. Could you share a little bit more about your responsibilities, your day-to-day routine in that 1 year you were the dean?
Right. Now, again, things have changed, and it's changed for the better. It was not democratic in those days. And I was a dean. All I needed to do was to have the support of the strong heads of departments. As you know, medicine and surgery are the 2 biggest departments in the faculty. I came from Faculty of Medicine, and my mentor, Professor H.S. McFadden, was the head of the department. And the head of department was surgery was Professor G.B. Yong, and he was a very good friend of McFadden, and therefore I could almost control the department with the support of the 2 heads. Having said that, I did do something pretty good, and that is I tried to reform the curriculum, and that is important because, as you know, medicine progresses day after day, and what was good yesterday might not be the best, and we are always looking for the better. So we try to modify the curriculum to suit the present need. And also, I had very good relation with the government. In those days, it wasn't the Hospital Authority yet; it was the Department of Health and Medicine, I think it was called, and had a lot of good friends there. And therefore, I was elected to sit on the medical council, and I was able to extend my wings beyond the Faculty of Medicine.
Wow. And if we could go back to about developing curricula, what is that process sort of like? Anything in specifically about how to create an entire or reform an entire curriculum?
No, because it wasn't a reform of the entire curriculum. If I remember correctly, we had to introduce some specialties because, as you know, now people concentrate on specialties. In those days, there was no specialty. There was only general medicine, and we tried to develop different specialties like cardiology, respiratory disease, etc. Of course, it was done mainly by the head of the department, Professor H.S. McFadden. And also, we had to introduce new subjects like ear, nose, and throat, radiology, ophthalmology, and so on. These were introduced into the curriculum so that it's more comprehensive and in line with the modern day development, or the then day development, but not modern day.
Right. And this position as dean, how is it different from the other responsibilities you've had in your career?
The responsibility was this being administration. You have to get the consent of the different members of the faculty. You have to persuade them that this is in the best interest of the faculty. So you did a lot of persuasion, and you have to do a lot of behind-the-scene work, talking to different people at different times and so on.
Right. And as we know, towards the latter parts of your career, you focused more on the administration side of things. Did you ever miss doing like the clinical or research aspects of your career?
Well, you asked the very tricky question, because I was asked some years ago, why did I turn in 1979, I think, from a teaching and research career to administrative career. It came actually by chance, because at that time when I first became an associate dean, at that time there was only one associate dean rather than a dean in 1976 or 77. And the reason why I became that was because the dean then was a professor of physiology. He graduated from St. John's University, well-known university in China, but his medical degree was not accepted by the medical council, because China is different. Hong Kong was a British colony then. And therefore, he became dean, but he could not get in touch and could not negotiate, could not discuss, could not gain respect from the clinical partners, graduates, doctors in Hong Kong. So he wanted me to become his associate dean. So as associate dean, I did all the work connections and so on with the with the clinicians, doctors who are practicing in Hong Kong. So then later on, when he retired, the then professor of pathology said that you should become the dean because you've been doing this all along. That's how I got into the deanship, and from the deanship later into Pro-Vice-Chancellor. As you know, research has to be a wholehearted thing. You cannot do it half-heartedly. And therefore, from the time I became dean, I already knew that I had to tone down my research career. I had to scale down my research career. And I changed over at the peak of my research career. And there was a question that I can never answer myself, whether it was a wise move or it wasn't a wise move.
Speaking of your research, I know that a lot of it is focused, or it was focused, on hypoglycemic attacks in hepatic carcinoma patients and periodic paralysis in patients with thyrotoxicosis. For our audience who may not be very aware of what all that means, do you mind sharing a bit about your research?
Now, nowadays, for modern research, we always talk about genetics. What about cellular research, using single cell or even proteomic, a protein. Now, in those days, we did not have that kind of research. Research was more of a physiological research rather than cellular research. And my professor, again, mentor and Professor H.S. McFadden, who's, in fact, this library is named after him. In addition to being he came from Scotland. In addition to being a very excellent teacher and a very good clinician, he's a very good researcher. And he tells us that you must have a sense of curiosity. You must ask why, always ask why. And you must have a keen observation. And once you observe something, you want to find out why this is so. So as you may know at your stage of your career, hepatitis B is very common among Chinese. Hopefully, it will not be so in the next generation, or even your generation, because in 1988, all babies born in Hong Kong have been given hepatitis B immunization without even asking your consent, universal protection. And therefore, the next generation of children, or your generation, will not have primary carcinoma liver. But in my generation, it was very common, primary carcinoma liver. It was a terrible disease because it affects men and women at the prime of their life, in the 40s and 50s. And it was very, very sad. You can see a young, able man or woman dying from carcinoma liver, and there was no treatment possible, and leaving behind the widow and the young children. And on one occasion, we found that these people, a certain group of patients with carcinoma have low blood sugar and become unconscious. So we started to study why this is so. And we found out that the cancer can produce a factor which behaves like growth factor, which can increase the metabolism of carbohydrate and so on.
Right.
And there's no cure for it at that time, but that gives us a thesis for the generation of these symptoms and the growth of the tumor. Now, thyrotoxic periodic paralysis is an interesting one. It occurs only in Chinese and Japanese. In fact, was first described by the Japanese in Southeast Asia. So much so that if you look up the Oxford medicine, Oxford textbook medicine, in one edition, not all the editions, I wrote a chapter on thyrotoxic periodic paralysis, but they didn't ask me to write it again for subsequent editions because the Europeans are not interested in it because they don't have it, you see. But it's interesting because it affects people in this part of the world. We found out there's a genetic disorder. This is genetic. We found out the gene as well, which increases the activity of a sodium-potassium pump across the cell membrane. And if not treated, it can be very dangerous. But if treated, the patient will recover completely. So very interesting. So that teaches me one lesson. And that is when you do research, of course, medical research or scientific research is global. There's no national boundary. Everybody should focus on the like COVID. You know, all the countries should do research and try to prevent COVID, the spread of virus infections. But there's certain conditions which are unique in your locality. If we don't do it, nobody else will do it. Mm-hmm. So I think we should also focus on the local diseases in addition to the global disease.
Right, I see. And moving on towards the many awards that you've received, notably you have obtained the 2 titles, Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire and Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. So I have a photo of you here. For those who may not be aware, do you mind sharing a little bit about the difference between these titles and how one may obtain these 2 titles?
I think perhaps I should mention the first one, Justice of Peace. Right. The reason why I mentioned that is because there's a joke behind that. Now, Justice of Peace is given by either the colonial government or in Hong Kong to professional people whom government can trust for them to give good advice and so on. But one of the main functions of a Justice of Peace is to visit hospitals, prisons, hospitals, prisons, and at one time, because of the Vietnamese refugees, the Vietnamese camps, to make sure that these places, the hospitals, the prisons, and the camps are managed properly, and there's no inhumane or unfair practice in those days. So the first thing we do is when we go into a prison, for example, we ask the prisoners, do you have anything to complain? And the prisoners may come forth and complain about this and that. The interesting thing I mentioned is that to become a Justice of Peace at my time, we had to swear to being loyal to the British government, to the Hong Kong, the British government. So when I swore, I said that how can I swear just to the British government? I'm a Chinese. So I said, no, without saying it out, I said that I swear my loyalty to the Queen, etc., except if Britain fights Hong Kong, I'll fight against the British. So this is a joke. You can do that. But another funny thing is that because as a Justice of Peace, I had the chance of riding a helicopter to go to visit the Vietnamese camps and so on. And the third funny thing is that when I visited the mental hospital, again, medicine is much, much better nowadays. In those days, people who are schizophrenic, who are mad, they get 2 kinds of operations. One is the lobectomy, removing part of the brain. That person becomes not really a human being, but a functioning human being. And secondly, they give a convulsive therapy, And it was terrible to see people like that. And I said that I would never study the psychiatry, psychiatry. But things are different now. We don't do this anymore. So these are the funny points about this. Now the OBE and the CBE are given to people who have offered valuable contribution to the service of UK, because it's given by the Queen, but the UK, of course, Hong Kong being part of UK. And therefore, the OBE first was because of my work as a chairman of the Medical Council and so on and so forth. The CBE later because of my work outside medicine in the work on Education Commission.
Right, and with these titles, it's clear like you've done a lot and you've accomplished a lot in your medical career. Do you have a life quote or mantra that keeps your motivation going, especially with this being your 71st year with Hong Kong U?
I think the motivation is that, first of all, I'm a restless person. I cannot stay at home doing nothing. So I always find something to do. That's my shortcoming. And secondly, I feel that we have received so much from the community where we live. You know, we were given free education, free university education. I got it free because I got a scholarship, and I thought we must give back to the society. Society could mean the community where you live or community beyond, worldwide, globally. And when people say that you have to have a good work-life balance, you need a good work-life balance, but the balance can be tossed this side or tossed that side. So when you feel that you have the capacity to do so, you have the opportunity to do so, you must try to do more beyond your own small sphere of work.
Right. And you mentioned before Professor McFadden, who was your mentor, and you had also a lot of other mentor figures in your life, like your father and your older brothers. Are there a few big life lessons that stick by you that you've learned from them to this day?
I learned several things from Professor McFadden first. He was a very good teacher, was a very good clinician. He always put patients' interests first. On one occasion, again, bad old days, there was a lot of typhoid fever in Hong Kong. And he went to see a patient with typhoid fever at his home. The patient was very ill. He had to take the patient to the hospital, and there was no ambulance around. So he carried the patient from the patient's home to the hospital, Queen Mary Hospital, admitted the patient, and he contracted typhoid fever himself. So this is very unselfish way. You know, the patient's interest comes first, because time is gold, time is brain, time is heart, and time is everything. And secondly, he told us that we must have a sense of curiosity. You always ask the question, why? Otherwise, you will never get any progress. From my brother, I remember my second brother. He died during the war from a car accident. And before the war break out, when we were kids, we had a group of my cousins and I stay at home, and he was coaching us, you know, summer holiday coaching us. And on one occasion he praised my cousin and saying that she was doing very well, and didn't praise me. I was very annoyed. I said, I'm so much better than she is. Why is it that you don't praise me, you don't praise her? And he said that, well, for you who have always been doing well, you don't need any praise, you don't need any encouragement. But for him, it's very important. It's added value. It's an encouragement. So I realized that it is true that you have to help the less fortunate than you are.
Mm-hmm. Those are really good life lessons. It's clear they taught you a lot, and I know that you are also a teacher. To you, what does it mean to be a good teacher?
I think a good teacher is someone who, first of all, who is patient, which I'm not. That's the trouble. You have to explain things carefully to people. You have to stimulate people to think. Nowadays there's absolutely no place for rote learning, because you can always find it in the Google, in the MedLife, and all sorts of things. Facts are not important. You have to help to teach people how to think, how to do problem solving, and how to ask questions. So logical thinking is very important rather than rote learning. For to be a teacher, you have to be humble. You know that you don't know everything. There are times you make mistakes. Admit your mistakes, and you learn together with the patient, with the students. I remember in my time there was one teacher. One student, very interesting. I think she's still around in Hong Kong. He was the only one who could question Professor McFadden at the lecture, say that you are wrong here, you're not quite right there. And on one occasion, I didn't prepare my lesson properly. As you know, the extraocular muscles are very complicated. The movement, the functions of the extraocular muscles, I made a mistake. And then he said, you are wrong. Dr. Young, I was doctor then. Dr. Young, this is wrong. I said, well, I just have to admit it because I didn't do my homework, you see. And, you have to be modest. You have to admit your mistakes.
Right. And thinking about learning in general and going back again to your family of scholars, I wanted to ask you more of like a philosophical question. What are your thoughts on the long-standing debate between nature and nurture when it comes to a child's capabilities and behaviors?
Right. Now, people always say that men are born equal. I think men are not born equal because you have different genes. You may have genes like Einstein, you may have genes like an idiot. So men are not born equal. But they must be given equal opportunity to develop their potential to the full. That's what my idea of an ideal world is, ideal nurturing is. And that is why I fully support for example, nowadays you have even universities. You have different kinds of universities. You have traditional universities, you have research universities, you have the so-called now applied sciences university. The applied science, actually I sit on the board of Applied Science University, St. Francis University in Hong Kong. I think it's very important to have people like this because I remember on one occasion, one of the teachers of the St. Francis University stood up on occasion and talked about his career. He is in his 40s, and only in his 40s he finds out exactly what he wants to do in life. Mm-hmm. And all along he was doing part-time job, including security and so on, until he got nursing. And he really liked nursing. He took a part-time degree in nursing, and he became a very good nurse. People, you have to give them the opportunity to develop to the full potential. Not everyone can be the Einstein.
Mm-hmm. Right, I totally agree. And I wanted to ask you, with your myriad of experiences as a clinician, professor, and as a student, how do you think the next generation of medical students like myself can better prepare themselves for exams and just studying in general?
I think, first of all, you know that studying medicine and pursuing a career in medicine needs hard work. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You need hard work. But besides hard work, you need innovation and sense of curiosity. You need teamwork. Nowadays, nobody can tok sin其身. You need a good team. You can be the leader of a team, you can be a member of a team, but teamwork is very important. And thirdly, don't be so concerned about what you get in return. 斤計較, don't 計較, 斤計較, because you try to do your best. What you feel is the best, irrespective of what the return to you will be, whether you gain money, you get a reputation. But if you find that this is a right thing to do, just go ahead and do it. You have to have the courage to go forward and try.
Right. Thank you for the advice. Speaking of the future of medicine and healthcare, could you maybe discuss a little bit about how primary healthcare specifically has changed in the past few decades?
Now, it has really changed a lot. In my brother's time, that is in the 1930s, there was no specialty. There was only family doctor, and my brother was a very good family doctor. I always joking to my students sometimes that even during the Second World War, when people were starving, our family could have chicken for New Year or Mid-Autumn Festival and so on, because the grateful patients would always bring this small gift to you because they were grateful to you. the family doctor then looked after the patient from cradle to grave. They knows the whole family, is a family friend more than a doctor. It was a very gratifying life. But now, as later on, as we developed specialties and so on, for some time, for some period, the patients looked upon the family doctors as second-rate doctors. Now, this is absolutely wrong. The family doctors have their own niche, they have their own advantage, and so on and so forth. And so now we are going back, and we feel that a family, especially with the aging population, an old person would have multiple mobilities, comorbidities. And you imagine this old lady, 1890, would go from one clinic to another. He would spend all his time visiting the government specialty clinics. And in addition to money and time, she also needs someone to accompany her there. It's very unhealthy sort of situation. So that's why the government now is developing family medicine again, so that there's someone who can take charge of the health of the person, besides offering preventive medicine. Preventive medicine is very important.
Right. And besides the ones that you've mentioned, are there any other pressing concerns that you think will arise in the next few decades regarding healthcare?
I think first of all, emerging infections. You can't escape from it. Mm-hmm. Even you can control one emerging infection, another one will come up because the germs, the viruses are very clever. They mutate. So always have watch out for emerging infections. And this is why international communication is very important. For example, Hong Kong being close to China, we would be the first one to develop to find out the origin of SARS, SARS, mm-hmm. which was a terrible thing, in 2003. So international cooperation is very important. Surveillance is very important. But the thing which we can never overcome is inequality in healthcare. You look at the poor countries, the rich countries, you talk about treatment of cancer, treatment of genetic diseases, gene therapy. In the poor countries, they can't even afford to treat common infections and common malnutrition. So inequality is the main problem.
Is there anything that you suggest the future generations of medical professionals can do to address these issues? I think it looks as if the politicians can do much more than the doctors. But as doctors, all we can do is to try our best to look after our patients and to do research, to find out new ways and good ways of treating a lot of diseases. For example, a lot of genetic diseases now are still incurable, and to do research with the progress in medicine. And everything must be with the patient's interest first, whatever you want to do. Right, and clearly you've definitely contributed a lot to the Hong Kong community. That's something that all of us are really thankful for. I wanted to ask you one final question. What are you up to now, and do you have anything on the horizon that you foresee, any projects?
No, I have nothing on the horizon except that in my spare time, I venture beyond the field of medicine. For example, I'm on the management committee or chairman of the management committee, a governing body of a university, the St. Francis University, which I fully support because it's an applied science university, apart from the fact that I'm a Catholic myself and so on. And I'm also in a senior management committee of a what do they call it? Direct subsidy? No, it's a private secondary school, which is not as famous as the fake DGS or St. Paul's College and so on, but it's a pretty good secondary school for middle-class people, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my role in it.
I'm so glad to hear. I heard also that you used to travel a lot and you would collect lots of dolls from everywhere that you went to. Anything that you're collecting now?
No, I still have hundreds of dolls at home.
Wow.
Because I thought the dolls would, reflect the culture of that particular people, a particular place. And by the way, as far as my book is concerned, I think it's quite popular. Not because I'm popular, but it also it reflects the changes of that generation of the 90 years in Hong Kong and in the world.
Right.
It's the socio-economic, political change during that period, which is important. Unfortunately, the author, Professor Moira Chen, who was very famous, and she is a graduate from Hong Kong University, of course, and she got all the prizes when she was medical student, but unfortunately she died earlier this year from lung cancer. Right. And she couldn't even read the final proof of the book.
My condolences.
That's right.
But yes, thank you so much again for coming today and to speak about your story and your life. We're really glad to learn a lot more about you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry each medical group class is so big now. We can hardly give individual students her deserved attention.
Right, I think there's over 300 of us now each year.
in the bad old days was much better because we got to know the students very much better, and we could find out what they actually need. Nowadays it's just a group.
That's true. They do have a lot of helpful systems in place, though. They do ask us a lot for our feedback and during town halls. But yes, thank you again for your time today.
Yeah,